What if everything you thought you knew about female pleasure was only scratching the surface? What if the difference between an average experience and something unforgettable came down to a few subtle shifts, tiny details most people completely overlook? And what if the most misunderstood response in female sexuality isn't rare at all, just rarely understood? Because here's the truth: most women don't naturally respond with an intense, overwhelming release to sexual stimulation. Not because they can't, but because the approach is often wrong. The focus is misplaced. The rhythm is off. The understanding is incomplete. But when you begin to understand the deeper anatomy, the hidden connections, and the techniques that actually align with how the body is built, everything changes. To really understand this, you have to start beneath the surface, literally. There's an area tucked behind the pubic bone, surrounding the urethra, known as the periurethral glands. Some refer to it as the female prostate. It's not just a small, isolated structure, it's part of a larger network, deeply connected to the internal anatomy of the clitoris. And that's where things get interesting. Because the clitoris isn't just the small external structure most people think of. In reality, it's far larger, extending internally, wrapping around the vaginal canal, forming a complex system of sensitive tissue. When stimulation is directed upward toward the pubic bone, it doesn't just feel good randomly. It's activating this deeper structure, engaging both the clitoral network and the surrounding glands simultaneously. That's why certain movements, like upward angling, grinding, or pressure against the pubic bone, can feel dramatically more intense. It's not coincidence, it's anatomy. And yet, despite this, most experiences completely ignore that upward focus. The result? A disconnect between stimulation and response. In fact, nearly three-quarters of women report that penetrative sex alone doesn't lead to orgasm. Not because something is wrong, but because something is missing. The fix, surprisingly, isn't complicated. It's about shifting attention. Instead of focusing purely on penetration, the movement becomes rhythmic, controlled, and angled upward, ensuring consistent contact with the areas that actually respond. At the same time, there must always be some form of clitoral stimulation, whether it's pressure, friction, or indirect contact. When these elements come together, the entire experience becomes more intense, more connected, and far more likely to build toward a powerful release. And even if that release isn't the kind people often talk about, the difference in intensity is undeniable. But there's another layer to this, one that's been practiced, refined, and passed down for generations. In parts of Central Africa, there's a technique known as Kunyaza, sometimes referred to as kachabali. The name itself translates loosely to make her release, and its reputation isn't based on theory, it's based on results. This method doesn't rely heavily on penetration. Instead, it focuses on rhythmic stimulation of the external clitoral area using controlled, repeated motion. The movement is deliberate, almost patterned, alternating directions, maintaining a steady rhythm, building intensity over time. What's fascinating is what's actually happening during this process. There's a cycle: brief penetration, withdrawal, external stimulation, repeated again and again. The emphasis isn't on depth, it's on precision and rhythm. And what this does is amplify sensitivity, creating a buildup that many describe as overwhelming. If you ask most women what stands out during intimacy, many will point to the very first moment of entry, the anticipation, the sensitivity, the initial surge of sensation. What Kunyaza does is extend that moment. It recreates it over and over, layering sensation until it reaches a tipping point. And when that tipping point is reached, the response can be intense, sometimes explosive. What makes this approach even more powerful is the shift in mindset it creates. It's no longer about rushing toward an endpoint. It's about connection, responsiveness, and prioritizing her experience first. And when that happens, something changes, not just physically, but emotionally. There's a deeper connection, a stronger sense of trust, a shared rhythm that goes beyond mechanics. And that's where things start to move into territory that's been debated, misunderstood, and even dismissed for years. Female ejaculation, often called squirting, has been the center of ongoing discussion. Some see it as rare. Others question whether it's even real in the way it's often described. And for a long time, the biggest question has been simple: what exactly is it? Historically, references to this phenomenon go back centuries. Ancient texts described it as love fluid, associating it with heightened states of pleasure and connection. But modern science has taken a different approach, trying to break it down, analyze it, and understand its composition. One study, though small, offered some intriguing insight. Researchers examined two women who reported experiencing this type of release. They collected samples before and after stimulation, comparing what was expelled during climax to both urine and male ejaculate. The results were surprising. While there were some similarities to urine, the fluid also contained significant levels of prostate-specific antigen, PSA, a substance typically associated with male prostate fluid. In fact, the levels found were much closer to what's seen in male ejaculate than in urine alone. This suggests something important. The fluid isn't purely one thing. It appears to be a combination, originating from the periurethral glands, with possible contributions from the bladder. But rather than being just urine, it's more accurate to describe it as a distinct response involving multiple systems working together. Still, the debate hasn't disappeared. Some researchers argue that what's commonly referred to as squirting is largely the release of diluted urine during intense stimulation. Others maintain that female ejaculation and squirting are separate phenomena, one being a smaller, thicker fluid from the glands, the other a larger, more watery release. And in many ways, both perspectives may hold some truth. What matters more than a label is understanding the mechanism. Those periurethral glands, sometimes called Skene's glands, surround the urethra. As stimulation increases, they begin to fill, becoming engorged. At the same time, the clitoris swells, blood flow intensifies, and the entire region becomes highly responsive. As pressure builds, the muscles of the pelvic floor, the vaginal walls, and the surrounding structures begin to contract rhythmically. These contractions, combined with the buildup of fluid, can eventually lead to a release, propelled outward in a way that mirrors, in some respects, the male response. That upward stimulation we talked about earlier, it plays a critical role here, because when pressure is applied in that direction, it doesn't just stimulate sensitive tissue, it also compresses the urethra and the bladder area. This is why some women describe a sensation similar to needing to urinate just before release. Understanding that sensation is key. Misinterpreting it can lead to hesitation, which interrupts the process. But recognizing it as part of the buildup allows the body to continue moving toward that release naturally. And again, not every woman will experience this, and that's completely normal. Just like any other aspect of human physiology, responses vary. What's important is not chasing a specific outcome, but understanding the pathways that make different responses possible. When you combine that anatomical understanding with intentional technique, upward angling, consistent clitoral engagement, rhythmic stimulation, you create the conditions where more intense experiences can occur. And beyond the physical, there's something else happening. When the focus shifts away from performance and toward connection, when the experience becomes about exploration rather than expectation, it changes everything. It removes pressure. It creates space. It allows responses to develop naturally rather than being forced. And in that space, the body often responds in ways that surprise even the person experiencing it. So whether this is something you've been curious about, something you've questioned, or something you've never really thought about before, the key takeaway is simple. It's not about complexity. It's about alignment, understanding how the body is structured, paying attention to how it responds, adjusting technique to match that reality. And most importantly, recognizing that true intensity doesn't come from force, it comes from precision, patience, and connection. Because when all of those elements come together, what once seemed rare suddenly doesn't feel so out of reach.